Section 19 of Bengal Dacoits and Tigers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Bengal Dacoits and Tigers by Maharani of Cooch Behar, Suniti Devi. Tiger Stories. A Cachar Tiger. In the province of Assam lies a fertile and picturesque valley called Cachar. Shut in on the north, south and east by lofty hills, this valley remained hidden for centuries and was never conquered by any of the Mohammedan rulers of India. Here a race of aboriginal kings held sway, and it was the East India Company who first became masters of this hilly corner of Bengal. In 1830, the last of the old Kachari kings died without heir, and Company Bahadur took possession of the little kingdom. In 1855, the discovery of the tea plant, growing wild in the jungles, opened out a new industry, and soon the low-lying hills, knolls, and undulating plains of the little valley became gradually clear of jungle, and covered itself with row after row of carefully kept and trimmed tea bushes. Today, acres upon acres of tea are grown in Cachar, and the inland steamers, which ply all through the rainy season up and down the wide rolling stream of the river Borak, bring down for export millions of pounds of tea for the cheering cup. Cachar is rich in forests, and tigers and other wild animals are there in plenty. During the monsoon, the jungle animals retreat to the higher levels of the forest-clad hills, but when the rains abate, they begin to gradually descend, and when the great hordes of fenlands dry up at the approach of the cold season, numerous tigers take up their winter haunts in the patches of jungle which grow here and there in the marshlands, and in the forests which often surround or separate the tea gardens. It was cold weather time, about 40 years ago, and 4 planters sat talking after dinner in the manager's bungalow on a tea garden in Cachar. We will call them M, B, C, and H. The bungalow, like many bungalows in tea districts, stood on a high hill, the steep sides of which had been terraced and planted with tea. On adjacent but lower hills stood the factory and coolie lines. Everything was quiet and lay wrapped in a heavy fog. In the veranda near the steps sat the bungalow chowkidar, or watchman. The charity of the tea company had provided him and his fellow coolies with blankets, and he wore his in the usual Pachim, Northwest Provinces style. One end of the blanket is pleated and tied closely with a piece of string, the short part above the cord forming a tuft. The wearer pulls the pleated end of the blanket over his head, the tuft resting on his crown. The sides of the blanket are drawn round the body, and thus the blanket is made to form both a hood and a cloak, in which the wearer hugs himself against the inclemency of the weather. The chowkidar sat on his mat huddled up in his blanket, droning one of the time-honoured bhajans or hymns of India. Presently he disappeared, and next piercing yells rent the mist-laden atmosphere. The 4 sahibs were in the veranda in a trice, and soon discovered the chowkidar returning to the veranda, visibly shaken and without his blanket. "What is the matter, and who shouted?" asked the manager. "Sahib," the chowkidar replied in a quavering voice, "a tiger sprang on me and caught the knot of my blanket." "Here," interrupted the 4 Englishmen incredulously. "Yes, Huzur, or your Honour. As I sat here against this post, the tiger came, seized the knot of my blanket, and began to pull. Like lightning I made my plan. I grasped with a strong tight hold the sides of the blanket, and holding myself together like a ball, I let Lord Tiger pull. He dragged me to the edge of the tila, or hill. There I suddenly let go the blanket and shouted with all my might. The tiger fell over, down the hill, and is gone." Sure enough, there were the footmarks of the tiger, the mark of the drag, and the signs of where Stripes had slipped over and down the terrace. The tiger had been harrying the coolies for some time, and a rumour had got about that he was a man-eater. It was pretty certain that he would come again the next night, so the planters determined to sit up and shoot him. On the following night, after dinner, M, B, C, and H took their positions on the veranda. Each had his loaded gun, and all waited patiently for the tiger. Time passed. It was weary work, and they dozed. M's dog, had wandered off to the kitchen as usual after dinner. After some time, it returned hurriedly and ran up the steps of the veranda, barking in a frightened manner. The dog's barking woke the four men. B sat first near the steps, and H not far from him in a dining-room chair. The dog ran into the dining-room and hid himself under the table, and everything again became quiet, and the men waited. Suddenly, a hoarse cry paralyzed three of them. "He's on me! Shoot!" The tiger had come up onto the veranda and, springing at B, caught him by the arm. Then, releasing the arm, he made a spring at his victim's throat. B was instantly on his feet, and as the tiger essayed his throat, he rammed his clenched fist into the animal's mouth. The tiger shook the man's fist out of its mouth and made another attempt to reach his throat. B repeated his maneuver. This happened 3 or 4 times. In the meantime, the other 3 men dared not shoot for fear of missing the ferocious cat and killing their comrade. H had the presence of mind to swiftly fix his bayonet, and rushing towards the tiger, he thrust it into the animal's side, firing as he did so. The tiger fell backwards off the veranda, mortally wounded, but to the amazement of the sahibs, struggled up and made another attempt to get at B. He was, however, too badly wounded and fell back dead. B's hand and arm were terribly mauled, and after medical treatment, he had to go home on long leave. End of section 19.